Welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I am Kristen.
And I'm Rick.
And we have today a guy by the name of Jon Clash.
That's right.
He has a book out called Law of Attraction, a gateway drug to spiritual heroin. Mm-hmm. And he comes to us from Puerto Rico, but he's got quite a story. He has a background in Santeria. The only thing I know about Santeria is the song. I don't practice Santeria. That's really all I ever knew about it. So he kind of explains a little bit what it is, which was really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, you're finding, obviously, as his book subtitle says, that it's a gateway drug to some weird stuff.
Yeah, the law of attraction, he breaks down what it is and where it came from, and it's good stuff.
Super cool guy.
Really good stuff.
We had a really fun time getting to know Jon, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So don't forget to like, subscribe, all those things. Let us know if you like the video, because
we're actually here.
It's us.
It's real. We're real people.
Look, it's us. Okay, I won't do that anymore.
This is awkward and weird. You made it weird, Rick.
Well, when you get spirit fingers, you can't stop a freight train.
These are spirit.
Oh, there they are. All right, you guys, let's get into that episode.
All right.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
It's called Law of Attraction, a gateway drug to spiritual heroin.
That's right.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah. So he's got a book out called The Law of Attraction, and we're going to let him tell you a little bit about that book. We wanted to promote it because we heard him on another podcast, and we just, really enjoyed his, just the way that he was presenting the message of his book. But we don't want to do any spoilers. We want to let him get into that information for you. But Jon, we just wanted to throw it to you to where you can give kind of a brief background of how this book came to be, what kind of led you down that road, and then, how you ended up with this book in hand.
Definitely. Well, Rick, Kristen, thank you so much for having me on here. It's a pleasure. And the title of your podcast is so awesome because I'm into the fringy stuff. It's interesting, and it's when you're talking about fringe topics, right? It's like you don't have to believe every single thing that you hear in the fringe topic, genre, but it's still super interesting in many aspects, and it gives you rabbit holes to go down. And I am a rabbit hole follower, and that's actually how I came up with the book. So I was, there's a whole other background, but I'm just going to skip to the point of getting involved in law of attraction. And for those of you that are listening that don't know what law of attraction is, it's a new thought / new age philosophy or spiritual worldview in which they say that like attracts like. And what that means is that whatever your predominant thoughts are, whatever you're saying the most, your words have power, your thoughts have vibrations, your words have vibrations, and those vibrations connect with the vibrations of the universe, and whatever you're thinking or speaking, you are attracting back to yourself. So it's kind of like sorcery, except they put a science spin on it, and but then when you dig into the science, it doesn't really make any sense. So that's essentially what it is, and it's really popular. It was popularized by the book The Secret. Well, that's just, I would say, modern popularization. Was is that even a word? Popularization?
It is now, buddy.
It sounds right.
You just put it together.
There's a lot of syllables. So it's become popular because of this book, The Secret, and now it's becoming even more popular. And so I got into it through business, right? Whenever you're in business, especially in sales, people, if you're on somebody's sales team, they look for ways to keep you motivated. Sales is tough. It is. You have to face a lot of rejection. Your family's going to tell you you're stupid. It's just a whole, just go get a real job. There's a whole mess that comes with it. So it is important to train your mind to think positively when you have so much negativity heading your way. So one of the ways that they do that, and I've noticed this after being in the industry for about 10 years, is that you can't look left, can't look right without eventually bumping into somebody teaching you the law of attraction, right? Yeah. And it goes beyond just, and I tell this to people, I'm like, why don't we just tell people that it's better to think positive than it is to think negative? Because that is practically speaking, that's a good idea, right?
Yeah,
It just is. Why don't we just say, hey, this can get pretty tough, so it's important to train your mind to focus on the positive, not ignore the negative, but focus on the positive and keep moving in the direction that you want to go. And instead, we teach them that if you focus on the positive, the universe is going to somehow conspire and bend to your will and give you all of the abundance. Oh, that word manifest is it hurts my soul whenever I hear
you on, right?
Yeah, whenever I hear it.
It's like, what are you trying to say? Manifest, like you have some kind of creative power from yourself that is going to manifest something, and there's not this higher power that's going to actually do that for you. You're thinking, I am the one doing it, and that's a really slippery slope because we don't really have any power apart from God, in my opinion.
Right. It almost reminds me of the word like conjuring, like you're trying to conjure something, which is a very kind of satanic practice also. So
that is very true. I've never made that correlation. That's good. I should have spoke to you before I wrote the book. Yeah. But what's interesting is when you just look at the definition of manifest, right? In the definition, it says just to bring something into fruition. And in it says like work towards bringing something into fruition. But that's not how it's defined within law of attraction and New Age spirituality. It's defined as, if you think about it, the universe will manifest it for you because, in fact, you are actually one with the universe, and the universe is God. So therefore, you are God, and you can create things in the same way God creates things because you are God. It's this goes back to the first lie told in the garden: eat of this, and you'll be like God. And we take a bite into the forbidden fruit of the law of attraction, and it opens up this gateway drug. It's a gateway drug to all these other New Age practices. And that's essentially why I wrote the book, because I went down a rabbit hole of what is this law of attraction thing? Because it was painted to me as science, right? So I wasn't a believer. Then I became a believer. And I still practice the law of attraction because I didn't know it was New Age spirituality. It was painted as this neutral thing of, this is just science. This is what science says. And that's a loaded word too, science, because it's an umbrella term. So you got to be like, all right, which branch of science are we talking about here? But to the regular average person, you hear that and you're like, oh, science says blank, and you just think blank is true because science says. We all just went through this, right? We all just went through this as a world. So I continued doing it, but then I eventually, I guess it was Holy Spirit conviction. I can't tell you when it happened that I started really looking into the law of attraction and what it was rooted in. But when I went down that rabbit hole, I came across people like Helena Blavatsky and Phineas Quimby and these like spiritual characters and like Aleister Crowley and all these mystics. And I'm like, wow, this is not Christian at all. It's not. And the thing is, they'll tell you that it is Christian because they'll use, ask and if anything you ask, believing, ye shall receive. They're like, look, see, the Bible teaches the law of attraction, not knowing that is completely pulled all the way out of context, right? And equating the God of the Bible with God of with the universe somehow. So I just went down this rabbit hole, and every layer that I peeled back, it was just like it's like leaving garbage in the can for too long outside, waiting for it to be picked up, and then the garbage, the sanitation doesn't come, and then when they finally come, there's like all these maggots underneath it. It was just like maggots of lies that was underneath everything they said. Science proves it. Maggots of lies under that. This is compatible with Christianity. Maggots of lies under that. This is a natural law of the universe. Maggots of lies under that. And it's just lie after lie. And then you get into the business side of it, and it's just a whole bunch of people telling you that you can get rich from the abundance of the universe by accessing this secret knowledge. Meanwhile, the only reason that they're getting rich is because they're just telling you that you can get rich if you buy their stuff. And if you go to their spiritual warrior retreats. And so I just, that's how the book came about, because I was just sick of having conversations with people who weren't listening. And I'm like, you know what, now if I talk to you and you ask me these questions, I could just say, hey, go read the book. If you don't read the book, you don't actually want to know the answer to your questions.
Yeah. No, and it's great. It's a great point, because, a lot of people talk about the law of attraction as if it's the only way, like that's the only way to get what you want in this world, is to put out these positive vibes. And, it completely sidesteps hard work and dedication, and all of those things, that long suffering, all of the things that are the fruits of the Spirit, where you're supposed to, Paul talks about it multiple times in the New Testament of this new kingdom that we're in now is going to be struggle city for you guys. And Jesus even said it, like, this is going to be struggle city for you. And if you think that you're just going to be riding around on this Jesus bus and everything's going to be okay, it's not. And this whole law of attraction flips that on its head and says, you know what, we think that we're better than God and we can figure this out. And that sounds a lot like Babylon to me.
Yeah, I would agree. It sounds a lot like Babylon, but there's also churches that teach this stuff under like a word of faith type theology, in which we can speak things into existence. And that's why you see people like Kenneth Copeland, those crazy videos of him like holding his hand on his head, telling the whole entire congregation to say, hair grow, because they believe that if they speak this to their hair, it will actually create and manifest little follicles. Look, I was desperate. I tried it. It didn't work. Okay, it did not work.
How's it going for you, Rick?
Yeah.
Works pretty good.
I need to get Kenneth Copeland over here. Maybe he's the only one that could save us.
It's quite possible. But then he'd have to get on,
Crowley that said the New Age is Satanism rebranded. I mean,
no, that was actually Anton. That was Anton LaVey. So just just the most famous Satanist ever. He said that, and I'm paraphrasing, I have the actual quote in my book, but he was addressing his congregation, if you could call it that. And he said that, maybe it's time that us Satanists reclaimed these New Age practices for ourselves where they rightfully belong, because lining the books of New Age bookstores, you find things for astral projection, divination, whether it's crystals, and you find all of these things that are really just ours, essentially, as Satanists, they're ours. And he said that all New Age is trying to play the devil's game without using his infernal name. And I think that when the author of the Satanic Bible says that, hey, what you guys are doing is actually ours, that is red flag city right there.
Right.
He might know a thing or two about Satanism.
It's quite possible.
And what they believe, So I would judge him to be a pretty reliable source in this case.
Yeah. Although he was bald.
Yeah.
So his hair, all that law of attraction stuff. Maybe he didn't do any law of attraction for his hair or speak it into existence for his hair. Or maybe he was just going for like the creepy bald dude look that I got going on,
Yeah, maybe that's what brought us together today, is our bald heads.
It's quite possible. So I have friends who are just as bald as us, and they say, our hair just moved from the top to the bottom. It migrated.
Yeah, that's the move. You got to have a beard or the bald head is useless. It's like there's a statement that has to be made.
Yeah, unless you want to be Moby or something.
Yeah, exactly. Moby.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
So,
man,
if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about kind of your history, like, your testimony at a younger age? Because I know you went through some, cultish type stuff as far as religion before you became saved.
Yeah, definitely. So I was pretty agnostic / atheist growing up. Did not grow up in the church. We did like the cultural Catholic thing when I was younger. But my father is an atheist even today. So keep him in prayer, because that's like, it bothers me so much.
Yeah.
Not because I want to be right, you know what I mean? But just because it's my father.
Right.
But so that was pretty much as far as God went in our home. And then when I got into like my teenage years, I was involved in gangs and drugs and selling drugs, using drugs, and all this type of debauchery stuff. I was violent. I was angry. I was, I sometimes I don't like telling my testimony because I feel like it's so cliche. Like, oh, I was so bad, and then Jesus came and it was so good. It's just it's the cliche, but it happened for me.
Sure.
So at some point in this debauchery I was living in, I was invited to a Santeria session, or they I call them seances, but that's not what they called them. But I didn't know what I was going to, and it was painted in this way, like, hey, you got to come to this thing and this lady will tell you your future. And I wanted to be a famous rapper. So I just wanted somebody to tell me that in my future, I will be a famous rapper, right? Like that's what I wanted. So I went there. I got all that in a bag of chips, way more. So long story short, I show up. It's like a party, right? Everyone's drinking beer, smoking cigars. And I'm like, oh, it's pretty cool. This is the coolest psychic session I've ever seen,
Yeah, right. Not what I was expecting. It's a lot brighter in here than I thought it would be.
What's funny is actually dark in there. It was like a party, but there was an altar there, and I didn't really think too much of it, because I thought it was kind of just part of the culture. I associated it with like Roman Catholicism, because you see people lighting candles to the saints and stuff like that in Roman Catholicism. So I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. Didn't really think much of it. Then the atmosphere shifted, right? And this woman who I actually know, she started changing personalities, right? And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? This is, you got to understand, I'm like agnostic, but I still watch like ghost stories and stuff like that on TV. But I'm watching this and I'm just like, what is going on here? But I'm also like, this is bugged out, but whatever, drinking the beer, smoking the cigars, I'm here for the ride. My friends have invited me to worse things, right? So, actually, now that I think about it, no, they haven't, because that was pretty demonic. That was probably the most demonic thing I was invited to. But at that time, worldly and subjectively speaking, I'm like, they brought me into worse situations than just some weird stuff going on. So
that's funny.
Anyway, she's changing characters, right? Like every time she changed, it's like a different personality. And I'm not really sure what's going on. I didn't actually find out till much later, but then she finally starts going around the room and talking to people. So I'm like, oh, this must be it. This must be when they're going to tell me my future. Yes, I'm going to be a famous rapper. This is
it's all
this is
coming
how
together.
I'm thinking. Yeah. So she comes to me and starts talking to me, and understand this woman doesn't speak English, right? She speaks only Spanish. And I knew her because she was related to the person who invited me. And I knew that she didn't speak English. So the first bugged out thing that happened was she started telling me about things that I've never told anybody, right? Things that happen in my life that I never told anybody. So I'm like, ooh, this is this is crazy. And I have somebody translating for me, right? She's speaking to me, but somebody's translating what she's saying. She also started talking about dead relatives that I had that nobody in the room I've never mentioned to anybody, right? So I'm like, wow, that's a little crazy. Then I'm noticing that she's asking me she's talking to me in Spanish. I'm getting it translated. I'm responding in English. The translator is not translating, and she is still responding to me. And I'm like, I know this woman does not know English. How is it that she knows what I'm saying, is responding in a coherent manner, and answering my questions without the translator? So I'm like, I don't know what this is, but there's some reality to whatever is going on right here. There's something legit here. So long story short, she told me, she's like, listen, we know you want to be famous rapper. We know you want to be on stages. I remember her saying bright lights, right? We know you want the bright lights and all of this stuff, and we're going to give it to you. All you have to do is X, Y, Z. And she gave me a list of things to do. But here's the thing. She's saying we, right? Like, we are going to give this to you. So I'm like getting this translated as we. And I'm like, I'm not asking the questions, but in my mind, I'm like, we. I'm like, is this some like Venom thing from Spider-Man? You know,
right.
I don't know what's going on. So anyway, she tells me that I got to like essentially make the altar, right? That was in their house. I had to make it in my house and my apartment. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. So I make the altar. I light my candles. You put like some candy and water and some of the saints like alcohol. I didn't even know these were saints at the time. And don't worry, I'm going to explain what all that means in a second. But so I do all this stuff, and that was pretty much it. But then good things started happening in my life as far as my music was going. I was getting recognized. I won Underground Music Awards. I was like, really, things were moving a little bit. I was getting a buzz, we called it, right? I had a buzz around my music and my name, relatively speaking. So I'm like, all right, this stuff must be working. So now I'm lighting the candles. I'm doing all this stuff, but I don't even essentially know what this is yet. So I eventually get to a point where I ask one of the people involved, I'm like, hey, what the heck is going on here? Like, what are we doing? And this is when they break down. They told me a half truth, right? So they said that each time that this woman changes personalities, she's getting possessed by one of the saints, right? And meaning like Saint John, Saint Matthew, Saint Michael, right? She's turning into these, being possessed by these saints. So that way they can communicate with us and help us with our lives and do things for us. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, because I got no spiritual discernment when this is going on. So I'm like, all right, sounds good, right? Like, if these are the saints, and I don't know much about the Bible, but I do remember the saints. I do remember this stuff. And so I'm like, all right, if they're saying that that's what this is, then cool, let's do it. And I'm looking at this like a good luck charm, essentially, right? Like, help me get the things that I want, and I will light these candles, right?
Yeah. This is all I have to do.
Yeah, it's a give and take there.
Yeah. It seemed pretty simple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seemed really simple. But then I enjoyed going to the seance things. I enjoyed participating in it. And so just for those of you guys that are listening that do not know what Santeria actually is, right? It is a blend of African spirituality, specifically from like the Yoruba tribes and Yoruba religions, with Roman Catholicism. And the way that this happened is during the slave trade, right? Mostly in Cuba, that's where it started, but it's spread as well, right? So when the slave trade happened, it was like you had to be Catholic, mass baptisms, like you're not allowed to worship your African spiritual whatevers. You're not doing it, not happening. You're Catholic. So what they started doing was disguising the African deities that they were worshiping. They called them orishas, and they started disguising them as saints. So that way they could continue to practice it, right? And so that kind of merger is what created what's known as Santeria. Now, it's known by other names in other places, but essentially the umbrella term would be Santeria, right? Worship of the saints, right?
Why did I think that it was like a Spanish origin? Is that just me?
Well, because it was the Spanish slave trade, right?
Okay.
So it was in Cuba, then it was in Dominican Republic, then Puerto Rico, then Brazil, and all of this. And so it has a big Spanish influence because the Spaniards were the ones, the reason that everyone out here in Puerto Rico speaks Spanish is because the Spaniards came here and colonized it, So that's how the Spanish twist kind of got on it, because it flourished in places like Cuba and the Caribbean, right? It also has a lot of similarities to voodoo. So there's a lot of similarities to voodoo. That's because it's essentially the same, it all traces back to the same essentially the same dude, Satan, but that's it's a whole other thing.
We're getting a little ahead of the story here.
Yeah. So rewind. So I didn't know any of this. They never told me about the African spirituality side of it. And I didn't find that out till much, 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 much later, right? Sure. So now my first smack in the face of reality with this was I was on a date with somebody, and I was wearing the beads that they give me for protection, right? And this woman, she was a Latina woman, and she's like, "Jon, what are those beads that you have on your neck?" And I'm like, "This chick don't know about Santeria? Like the white dude's about to school the Latina woman about this? Like this is how I'm thinking, right? Shows you human depravity. So I'm like so excited to tell her about this. So I'm like, yeah, these are the saints, and they do this and they do that, and blah blah blah. And the woman, she gets possessed by the saints and this that, and she's like, yeah, Jon, those aren't saints, those are demons. And I was like, what? This chick's crazy, I just chalked her up to being crazy. And she told me to read something in the Bible. I never read it. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but that kind of planted a seed for me. And I was like, all right, whatever, but I'm gonna still keep doing this because I don't even really believe in angels and demons and all this stuff. Like I really don't. So just some quick stories of what I've witnessed in some of these sessions. This woman would she'd pour wax on people and like fling beer around the room. Like she'd have a beer bottle and just go whoosh like that, and like beer would go everywhere, right? She would drink like bottles of rum to the face, like just guzzle the whole entire thing during these sessions, and smoke cigars.
Thirsty saints.
I know, right? And she would smoke the cigars. Like you remember in like Looney Tunes when somebody's smoking a cigar, it's like one puff and it's like all the way done.
Yeah.
I got to witness that in real life. I was witnessing Looney Tunes. So then there was one time she cracked a glass over her head, like a glass cup, and then ate the pieces of glass, right?
No.
Yeah. And I'm watching all this stuff and I'm rationalizing it in my head, Yeah. I'm like, oh, this must be powerful because she's able to do this and not get hurt. And I'm like really, really rationalizing all of this stuff in my head. I look back at it now like, you idiot. Like, how could you be so stupid? But I was pretty stupid back then. So I would say I'm relatively stupid now too. But
I'm with you there, man. But you get on that trajectory with, you're wanting something so badly, like your career to jump off, and you're wanting to become something, to give back to the world creatively. And then these people come in there and they trick you, and you don't know that you're being tricked, but that's how they get a hold of you, because your passion and your power and all the things that you're bringing to the kingdom now, that's what they want to distract you from, and it's really hard to see that at first, because we're like, oh, this is what we want to do. This is where we want to go. And God's like, no, pull the reins, because we actually want to go this way. Yeah. And so it's cool to see that you go on a trajectory where you think you're going somewhere, and then you end up somewhere completely different, but it all matters. It all matters to the story, to the journey. So it's cool to listen to your testimony, man. It's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
So were these, seances or get-togethers just at people's houses, or did they have like a facility, a building? Like,
no, it was all people's
going on.
It was all people's houses.
Okay.
Yep. It was a party. It was an event. Yeah. Like it was worldly speaking, it was fun, Yeah. That's why I looked forward to it. And so I eventually got invited to church, right? So I started business, and that got me into like law of attraction stuff, but it also got me around people who believed in God. And this was like mind blowing to me, because some of these people were multi-millionaires. And in my mind, I had like, I thought that you had to be poor in order to be like a Christian. That's just what I thought, unless you were like a televangelist or something like that. That's what I thought. And when these guys were not poor, but they would talk about Jesus nonstop, like so much that I wanted to be like, yo, shut up. It piqued my interest. Right. Yeah. And then I eventually got invited to church. I'm from New York, so it was to Hillsong. And the way that they got me was saying, yo, you got to come to this church. It's like a rock concert. You got to come. And by this point, I'm still got my candles and everything, still doing all that stuff. Now I'm into the law of attraction, thinking that it's science. And, so I'm like, I'm like just following anything essentially now. And so he was like, you got to come to church. And at first I'm like, look, I'm not a church dude. Like I'm just not. And he's like, Jon, this church is different. You have to go. And we know it was different. So I went there and I had a good time. The music was awesome. There's a bunch of people my age there. It was, I never experienced anything like it as far as this being a quote unquote church. So I enjoyed it, but I wasn't, it's not like I went there one time and I'm like, Jesus, that's not what happened. Yeah. So I started attending though, because I enjoyed it. And I was also into motivational speaking, and, the Hillsong model was kind of a motivational speaking church.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So God definitely used that to get me interested. Then I went to another church. One of my friends invited me up there, and I'm like, this church is cool. That church might be cool too. So I went, and by the end of it, I was at the bottom doing the whole altar call, took the little pamphlet and everything. And then I went home to my mother's house, because she lived by that church. And I was like, what the heck did I just do? Am I a Christian? I don't think I'm a Christian. I like started, playing these things over in my mind. And I came to the conclusion I was not a Christian. And but now I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this stuff out, because I got a lot going on here. So I'm going to figure this out. And I went down the rabbit hole of, many rabbit holes of, just studying Buddhism, Hinduism, atheism, Judaism, Islam, like all of these things I started studying, and it brought me to the person of Jesus. Everybody from every worldview tries to explain who Jesus is. He is obviously somebody very, 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 very important, right? So, I mean, the calendar's changed because of him. It's just, he is an obviously important person. So I'm looking at what these religions say about Jesus. Also, like Hinduism and Buddhism, they kind of that whole the universe is God thing. I'm like, how's the universe God? We have a Big Bang. We have the beginning of the universe. How could this be God? It's we're believing in a limited God if that's the case. So that kind of was an easy. No, you guys got some cool philosophy, but I can't. If you're going to deny like basic knowledge about the universe, like I probably can't trust everything else that you're saying.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah. So
NASA,
then
we're talking.
Huh?
I was just kidding. I said NASA, we're talking to you.
Yeah. Guys, good to see you. But so I went down these rabbit holes and just came to the person of Jesus. I watched a lot of like atheist versus Christian debates, and I got into like reliability of the New Testament. And at that time, I really didn't even comprehend what New Testament was, Old Testament, New Testament. I was just kind of learning these things. I knew what the 4 Gospels were. And then when I started learning about Paul and the the epistles and who Paul was, and like, why did all these people want to die for saying that Jesus Christ rose from the dead? Why are people still today trying to explain away the empty tomb and the sights of, Jesus being resurrected from the dead? And all these things are going on in my mind. And I can't tell you when it happened, but it happened where I was like, Jesus is who he says he is. I think that he is. And if he says that he's the only way to the Father, I'm going to put my trust in him. And I'm going to say, cool, that guy's going to get me to heaven. That's how I just looked at it at first. Like, not all paths don't lead to heaven. It's obviously clear to me that Jesus rose from the dead. I'm going to trust him for my salvation. And that was kind of it at that point. I didn't know theology. I knew more apologetics than I knew theology. Right. Yeah. I didn't stop lighting my candles. I didn't stop practicing the law of attraction. I didn't stop, drinking and doing debaucherous stuff. Like I just didn't. But I did believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he's the only way to heaven. And it's so incredible how God will, when you are his, he'll put up with your nonsense for, to an extent, he will put up your nonsense. He's got a lot of patience, but eventually he's, I don't want to say he swept the rug out from under me, but he allowed it to be swept. Right?
Yeah. Sure.
And I stumbled into a really good church, like just stumbling. This was after, I was living in Miami, driving a 6 Series BMW, making money, spending it faster than I make it, just all of this craziness. I actually got baptized in Miami, and I got baptized thinking that it would make my life better. I still had I had like a prosperity gospel mindset kind of. Then when I'm looking at my life and it's like just going in shambles, I'm like, I must be believing something wrong about God. I'm assured that my salvation is intact from putting my trust there, but something's off, right? Because I'm thinking that if you're a Christian, now life is going to be easy. You have all these blessings and all this stuff, this nonsense that prosperity gospel preachers preach. And I'm just like, something's off, right? And before I came, like, and everything started falling apart, I was more interested in learning like actual theology. And I have a mentor, thank God for this man named David Peach. I speak about him in the book. His father was pastor. His father's father was a pastor. Like he comes from a line of real, hey, this is how you read the Bible. This is the context. This is go get yourself a study Bible. Read it slowly. Don't just try to speed through this. Like he really taught me how to read it. And since I started reading it correctly, now I was like searching for the truth, right? And that's when I ended up in a good church. And it was the first time that I was around people who wanted to walk the walk, who wanted to live out the Christian values that are found in the Bible. And that changed everything for me. I never been to a church. We spent 72 weeks in Mark, I never been to a church that just walked through scripture like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of changed everything for me. It was like the things that I used to love, I started to hate. And through this process, I really dove into the law of attraction and like debunking it. I remember I also with the Santeria stuff, my the guy David Peach, we were at Del Frisco's after a sales training, right, in New York City, and he's just talking about the end times. And while he's talking about it, I'm thinking about these stupid candles I got lit at home. And I'm like, oh, when I get home, I am destroying that thing. And that's what I did. I went home, I like destroyed the altar. I'm like, I rebuke you in the name of, I don't even know what I'm doing. You know, like I'm just, I'm breaking it. I threw some of it in the woods. I think I burned some of it. Like I was just done with it all. And so that's kind of how I transitioned out of Santeria. And then I transitioned out of the law of attraction once I discovered all of the new age implications. I wish I could transfer out of my next door neighbor's dogs barking, but I can't.
It'll come,
so,
there's stages to life, it'll come these days. But yeah, man, no, it's such a powerful testimony to know that, you have all these people surrounding you and you're looking and the Bible says do not covet, but we do, right? We look around at all of the people's stuff. You got, people with nice houses and nice cars and, they got their children on Instagram. Everybody looks pretty and nice and everybody's put together. And then you realize that not everybody's put together. Everybody's a heaping mess and that we're all just lying to each other on social media. And what we really need to do is get back to the basics of community, like you found in a church where we come back into community and we say, okay, let's talk about these things that really break us apart socially.
Right.
And let's talk about them in our community, like with our neighbors and with our people and figure out like what we really care about. What are the things that are really important to us? Because everything you hear from the noise box on the wall is telling you that, the world's on fire and everybody hates each other and there's so much racism and there's so much this, but then I'm walking down the street and I'm waving to my neighbors and everybody's saying hi and everybody's fine. We need to get back to that community where we stop worrying about everything that's going on and really honing in on Jesus and listening to what it is that he's really saying and reading, as you said, reading the Bible for ourselves and slowing down, as your mentor said, just taking your time to really digest what Jesus is talking about. And I think in American culture, we've gotten used to listening to people talk to us and not participating at all, and I think there's a book called Pagan Christianity. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's by a guy named Frank Viola. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard of Frank Viola, but I didn't know he wrote a book called Pagan Christianity, but that sounds like it needs to be pushed up to the top of my reading list.
Yeah, dude, it's an epic book. And he basically goes through how we got to where we are now in Christian churches and how we do. He basically says that he was sitting in the back of church one day, like, why are we doing this? Why do we do that? Why do these people stand up here and sing? Why does the pastor stand behind that box? Like he was really breaking all that stuff down in his mind. And he found out that a lot of things that Christians do nowadays have been introduced from paganism slyly, and just kind of people just been pushing it in from the side here and there,
or just little bits at a time. It's those like small compromises over and over again, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, how did I get here?
Yeah, so he talks about how we went from house churches where we were basically communities meeting together, and then every once in a while we get together and have these big community meetings. But now we've gone back to the stadiums and the arenas where it's one person up there talking, like you said, the motivational speaker. That's what gets people in the door, which is good. But we also got to do that digging in to the Bible, be a Berean, as the Bible says. These are the group of people that would go after the message and they would look it up themselves. This guy, is he full of crap or is he telling me the truth?
Right. Yep.
That's
and if you think of church as a business, nobody wants to leave church feeling like crap. You don't want to go and be, have all of your sins broadcast and but that's what we should be doing. We just shouldn't be going there expecting to fill up our self-esteem and get all of that stuff taken care of. And then we forget what the pastor said 10 minutes out the door, and then we're on to lunch. Like, where are we going to eat lunch at?
I know I am.
That's what people expect from church. That's why it's gotten so watered down that, it's just corporate church, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough. So I think that there should be we should have a mirror held up to our face, but we shouldn't leave church feeling miserable. We should leave church feeling grateful that, even in our sin, Christ died for us, and that so we can reflect on our lives and say, you know what, there's some things that I want to change not because the pastor is telling me that I need to change, not because, of some emotional reason, but because I am grateful to God for what he has done to open the doors wide of heaven. The path is narrow, but the doors are wide open, and he has allowed for me to have access to that path. I want to live in a way that glorifies the one who did this for me. I think that changing any of your bad habits or your sins or anything for any other reason except your love for God is superficial, and it's going to just come back around.
Right. Yep. Totally.
And I do really agree with, though, of church should not just be a motivational speech, because with the whole Hillsong fallout, I was out of there long before then, and Hillsong wasn't all bad. There was it was a huge mess, but it wasn't all bad. I went to there's a guy named Nathan Finocchio. He did college classes there, and man, I didn't even know about different denominations. Like, I didn't know the Trinity. I just didn't know these things, and those college classes helped me learn so much. And he's a really, really, really good teacher. He's no longer with Hillsong, but yeah, like I learned a lot. But after the fallout, I don't even know a handful of people who are back at another church, or who are even believers anymore. Or were they even believers, or were they just going for the same reasons I was going because it felt good to be there? And I think every now and then a nice motivational speech from your pastor to give you some, a kick in the butt to have some passion in your life and stuff like that's cool, but it shouldn't be an everyday thing.
Right.
You got to teach people the word. You could kick them in the butt, motivate them every now and then, but you got to teach them the word.
Yeah, and you got to encourage them to be reading it themselves and digging in and going line by line and really trying to dig into who Jesus was and why he came and what the message was, because the Bible is an overarching story, and there's a lot to it. And it's hard at the beginning. We talked to a guy that was talking a lot like you, didn't know anything about church, didn't know anything about that. And he said he was just hungry like you were. And a lot of people that come to the faith that don't know much about it, didn't grow up in the church, that flipped switch really becomes this insatiable hunger where people just want more of the Gospels, want more of the word. Who is Jesus? What did he say? Why? And we live in such a great time to where now people can just find all that information online. The problem is, and this is going back to the Santeria discussion, is that everything that God is doing, Satan is trying to mirror so that you get distracted. And there's two paths that are going kind of side by side. And like you said, the door's wide open and this path is small, but this path is leading downhill. It might be slowly, but it's going downhill. So it's important to make those points. And I think that you do such a great job of that, of saying, like, don't get yourself into a situation where you don't know anything about what you're doing. You have to do this research and you have to listen to what other people have experienced so that that this is a trap,
Yeah. And theology is so important. I think just from my experience of watching Christian content creation and being in that environment now and seeing who's popular, who's like, you know, not so popular, me. And, you know, just listening to how people think about a Christian walk. They look at theology as like this side note. You know, they look at studying the Bible as like this like, oh, all you care about is head knowledge. And it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like you're saved 2 minutes and you're already telling people that you don't need to read the Bible. What are you talking about? It's you know, I see so many people who are so focused on experience and the power of God and the, you know, all this. To me, it's just new age. Like you're a new age Christian, essentially. If all you're focused on is experience and, you know, the power of God to have authority over this and like all this stuff. And I'm like, bro, I think everybody who becomes a Christian, you should tell people about Jesus, but you should be honest and be like, I don't know a lot about the Bible. And you should take time to learn it. Take those first few years to learn good theology. I wish I could like rewind and go back and be like, John, shut up. Just call David Peach right now and ask him, you know, ask him how this stuff works. So you can have a foundation to stand on. And theology is so awesome because I listen to, you know, so many different people's perspectives on like how they come to their conclusions, like Calvinism or Arminianism, you know, provisionism and, you know, eschatology is something that interests me so much. You know, some people believe in post-millennialism, some people premillennialism, some people don't believe in a rapture, some people do, like, and all these theological issues, you have to have a foundation in basic theology for you to enjoy the conversations on the non-salvific issues, right?
Yeah, right.
And people don't do that. They just throw. It's like they throw the Bible out and like, I don't need the Bible. I just want Jesus. And it's like, well, he wants you to read the Bible, you know?
Right. And I think it's, you know, digging into the Bible where you really learn God and Jesus, their character, who they were, what they did, and that is a motivation in itself to want to, you know, emulate what they did, you know, kind of,
Amen.
I don't know, makes me feel like I know, if you know a person better, then you're more likely to follow what they're saying.
Yeah.
Almost.
It's like, if I look at, you know, me and my wife's relationship, right? If I had no way to verbally communicate with her and I could not see her every day, but she left me a huge book of messages that she wants me to understand and things about herself and things about how she views me. If I couldn't speak to my wife or see my wife, I'm reading that book every single day because I love her so much and I want to know her, you know.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put that.
When it comes to the creator of the whole entire universe, we look at the Bible as if it's like, I don't really need that. What are you, insane? God is not, you know, speaking audibly all day to people just because they're saved. Like that's not happening. He left us this for a reason. He left the Bible to us for a reason. To read
it over millennia, you know, just trying to keep it out of the hands of bad people, you know, and trying to get it to all of us where it belongs. And I mean, just the proofs from that alone, you know, how did the Bible make it this long? And we can arguably say that there might be some things that have been left out, but there's a lot of truth in there, and it's provable truth. People have done the research. They've done the 10,000 hours of work to try to prove it wrong, and they can't. And these are skilled, educated experts, as you would have called them a couple of years ago. These are experts in their field, and these are people that have done the work, and they've said, the Bible's true. Jesus is the guy. But like you said, when you came to that point, there was still another point still another step that you had to take, which is to actually invite him in and make that repentance or that change of heart, where now you're following him as if he is your king. And we talked about on our last episode the whole idea of kingdom and how Jesus is coming back one day, and that there is a kingdom that we're supposed to be inaugurating now, and if we were all doing that right now, we would be coming a lot further as a society and coming a lot closer to him. But these distractions that we're talking about in this conversation, like Santeria and all of these different new age principles and things, they get you off onto these tangents to where you're just like, I don't even know where reality is anymore. And you're so confused that you're just like, and you just pick, it's almost like opening your Bible for the first time and like, what are we going to read today, God? And, but the reality is that's kind of where it is, when you begin to deconstruct your religion like you did and start to piece it apart and be like, okay, let's take everything by the numbers now. What's Catholicism? What's Mormonism? What's, and you go through all of these and you're like, okay, now what do I believe? How does this affect me? And I think people need to do that for themselves, because too many people are walking through this earth just like, it doesn't really matter. Well, my question is what if it does?
There's a quote from C.S. Lewis. It says, he says, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. If true, of the utmost importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. And I think apathy is one of the devil's best tools. I mean, I don't know. I don't have conversations with the devil, but just from seeing how the world is, I think apathy, as far as the afterlife, apathy towards the afterlife is a tool that keeps people from knowing the truth, because they have this nonchalant attitude of, oh yeah, well, I don't know. And then you ask, will you get to heaven? Yeah, I'm a good person. It's this like, this, I don't know, or I wouldn't even call it agnosticism. It's really apathy, apathetic as agnosticism. I guess that could be it. And that is, I think, very dangerous, especially because most people are not atheists, right? Like they're not. I think it's something like 3 to 9% of the population. I don't know, something really low. Most people believe in some sort of higher power, right?
Right.
But there's a Pew research done, and just Christians alone believe, the 63% of Christians believe in at least one New Age belief. And I think even more than that, call themselves spiritual, but not religious, right? So atheism is like, we fight against it a lot, but it's really not the biggest devourer of souls, if you could put it. It would be apathetic agnosticism / spiritual, not religious. Because then you think.
Ooh, that's an awful.
I like that.
A lot of syllables there too. Because then you think you have this connection to whatever this divine higher power is. If you're spiritual, not religious, you think that you're good just because you have this connection. I'm spiritual, and then if you're apathetic, you're like, yeah, well, whatever. I don't know. We'll see what happens. That's the majority of people, and that's why I think that it is so important for things like you guys are doing to just talk about God. You don't gotta, there's another thing in Christianity that bothers me where it's like, well, how many people have you shared the gospel with this week? It's like, like, shut up, dude. It's, I'm trying, but you also got to have good timing too,
like you lacked just now.
Yeah. So it's hilarious. But yeah, you threw me off track.
Sorry.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right.
Who does that?
Joke.
But doing stuff like what you guys are doing, of just talking about God subjects, talking about Jesus subjects. And Greg Kokel puts it a good way. He says, you just got to put a pebble in somebody's shoe. Just put a pebble in their shoe and, or plant a seed and just expect God to send someone else to water it. And that's how I look at just talking about Jesus. The truth of Jesus is so important.
Right. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by Christians because they think that we know everything. And so we're trying to kind of on this show just open things up like, well, we don't know everything, but let's just talk about this. That's all we got to do is talk about it. And between all of us, we can probably figure it out. We have this amazing guidebook that we can read that gives us the blueprint that we need. But people don't want to talk to a lot of Christians because we use these Christianese terms that don't make any sense. And they're like, okay, never mind. I'm not smart enough to talk with these people. But it doesn't have to be that way.
So my pastor, he flew out to Guatemala to marry me and my wife, right? And my brother, who is an atheist, got stuck with my pastor for 4 days prior to the wedding, right? And he, my brother, I think, went into these 4 days. My brother's cool. Like he's one of those people where it's like, yeah, believe whatever the heck you want, Right. But he, I think he went into it expecting my pastor to be like this, whatever a super liberal would think a pastor is,
Right.
That's what he went into it. And then afterwards he was like, yo, Jon, your pastor is awesome. I love that guy. He's so cool, and like exactly what you said, Kristen, is that people, they have this perception of they don't want to talk to Christians because they think they're going to get hit with all this Christianese. And my pastor, there was actually two pastors out there, the pastor and the co-pastor came, and they both just had a blast with my whole entire family, exploring Guatemala and going to these different things. And they became really good friends. And because of that, my brother went to his church. Now it didn't, he didn't convert or anything like that, but just the fact that my pastor, by just being a regular dude, was able to, when I was in town, I was like, hey, I'm going to Pastor Phil's church. He was like, cool, I'll meet you there. I was like,
whoa.
Okay.
That's the seed, though. That's all he needed. And you don't know what God's going to do with that.
You're like, why?
Yeah. I didn't say anything. I was just like, okay, cool. I'll see you there.
That's awesome.
He's like, yeah, I'll go there. I love that guy. And then, he asked me some questions about the Bible afterwards and then kept it moving. But, that just shows you about putting the pebble in somebody's shoe and also about how, we're supposed to be with people. Slapping everybody with the Bible usually doesn't work, but being the one Christian friend where your lost friends would be like, you know what, there's a lot of hypocrite Christians out there, but Kristen, I think I could ask her some questions about God. Rick, I think I could ask him some questions about God and not feel like they're judging my questions. And that's how we gotta be. Right. Our values, what we stand for, but we stand for them in love.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, like Rick always says, we're supposed to be in the marketplace. We're supposed to be out. We're not supposed to be standing behind a podium and doing, there is a place for that too. Don't get me wrong, but we're supposed to be out in the marketplace.
It's a fact, Rick.
Yeah, I heard that somewhere. It might have been in the Bible, but Jesus was, Jesus was out in the marketplace and he was mingling with all these people that you would be, probably the nightlife that you were talking about. Could you imagine watching God walk into that scene and just be mingling around, just walking up to all these people in there and just be like, hi, my name's Jesus. What's going on? And that's where he was, but he didn't leave it at that. Then he would go over and stand up on a table and be like, hey, I got something to say. And, things would get weird. And that was good, but he was telling the religious people of that time, like, you guys are the problem. You guys are the problem. You guys aren't teaching like he tells Nicodemus when Nicodemus comes to him. He says, aren't you the teacher of Jerusalem? Like, what? How do you not know this?
Yeah.
You know, and he was baffled by these religious leaders and how you're just not doing your job. You guys are more concerned about you and your lofty titles and your all of these things. And in the reality of the situation is he didn't even have a pillow to lay his head on.
Yep.
And to go back to your point before, where you thought all Christians were supposed to be broke, you know, you get that understanding because of who Jesus was. But that doesn't mean that Jesus is preaching the message of poverty. Some people take that to the extreme.
Yep.
He's saying, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness. And what all that broken down from Christianese means is choose to be a good person and do things in order to the way in which the creator of this place designed it to go. So play the game the way it's supposed to be played. This isn't Grand Theft Auto where you just get to go around and murder hookers and do whatever. Like, play the game the way that it's designed to be played, and you'll be good. Follow Jesus, you know, and that's where we need to get is stop being afraid of talking about Jesus, because it's the most important message in the whole world.
Amen.
Because like we said before, if it doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. But if it does, like, there should be something in you that's that pebble in your foot that says, maybe it does matter. Yeah. And I don't want to go to my deathbed on a whim and just be like, maybe Buddha was the guy. I don't know.
Yeah. We have to be, we have to live in urgency with patience, right? Like, we have to urgently talk to people about Jesus, but be patient for their response. You know, I had people try to talk to me about Jesus. I wouldn't say my whole life, but many times throughout my debauchery, I couldn't even hear them, you know? And I look at now when I talk to people about Jesus and there's like no response to it. And it frustrates me. And I'm like, man, I used to be the one who frustrated people. So we have to be patient and show long suffering in that patience with love. You know, we don't got to accept everything, but we have to make sure that we come from a place of love. And it's very easy to grab the moral high ground on people, but you got to speak to them in their language so they can hear it, and then be patient with the response. Because when stuff hits the fan, you know, and they're seeking answers, they have to be comfortable enough to come ask you.
True. That's exactly it.
Yeah, and like Paul says, I become everything to everybody so that some might be saved.
Amen.
And he's not talking about being fake or changing who he is, but he's basically saying, I'm going to meet them where they are so that then I could, and the word saved really throws people off sometimes. We're not talking about a conversion. We're talking about the salvation is your life with God from now into eternity. That's to break down what Paul's talking about. He's saying that if you do this, you can have this. And I'm taking this message to all of the Gentiles that don't know anything about it. And to unpack that word Gentile, that just means the people that weren't the Jewish people of that time. So the Jewish people of that time were in, or so they thought. And then Jesus came back and said, now everybody's in. So he kicks the door to heaven open. And like you said, it's wide doors now. And now we've got Paul talking to these people that have never thought that they had an opportunity to come in ever, and saying, welcome in. You're invited. And this is what you have to do. You have to believe that this guy that died on the cross and rose again is the God of this, all of this. And he's chosen you to come in. All you got to do is accept that free gift. And you can imagine minds exploding and how much that was tearing up the world at that time. But we're so far removed from that till now we can openly talk about it, but we don't. Yeah. And Paul's like risking his life to talk about it. And we just won't talk about it because it makes me uncomfortable in the grocery store when some lady's got her kids and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to. Or when I pull up to a stoplight and I got my Christian music blaring and I'm like, oh, I better turn that down because I don't want anybody to hear it out my windows, you know. And you're just like, whatever happened to Romans 1:16? You know, like I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You know, this is
but let me turn the volume down.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
you just have to lose that fear.
It's because, fear of rejection, fear of, not being accepted by society. These are all things because we are created for community, right? But we are created for the correct community. It's just we have kind of swapped out our correct community for the collective community, and now we just want to be accepted. Right. And I'm not saying you, me as we, but we generally as humans, since we are relational beings, we just want to be accepted by the other people that are around us. And also we want them to like us. So if we talk about Jesus, that's a risk that somebody might not like you now. But so we do got to get over that.
Yeah. I'm just convinced everybody likes me, and so I just don't worry about it anymore.
Oh, boy.
That'd be an awesome place to be. I wish I could get there.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm just kidding. Well, hey, man, this has been such a fun conversation. I'm so grateful and thankful that you were willing to take the time to come on. We just want to promote the heck out of your book because we think you've done a great job of tying that all together. And obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg, talking about what we've talked about this tonight, because your book goes into way more detail. And so can you tell people where they can find your book, the full name of your book, where people can find you on your socials and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. First, I just want to say thanks again for having me on. This was a lot of fun. The time flew by. I just looked at the time.
I know,
and oh my gosh, it's over already, right?
Yeah, tears.
But the crying face emoji. But so you can find me if you just search Jon Clash, Jon. There is no H involved. So Jon Clash. You'll be able to find pretty much everything. If you go on Amazon and just type in Jon Clash, it's the first thing that pops up. But the book is titled Law of Attraction, a Gateway Drug to Spiritual Heroin. And like I said, if you just go on...
Such a great title. I love it.
Thank you. I think the universe might have given it to me somewhere, but
so good.
But you can find it on just on Amazon, and if you enjoy it, please leave a review. That really helps me.
Yeah, please do. And get his book. What we're really trying to encourage our listeners to support people like you. You know, the controllers of this world have got enough money. Let's support these people that are tirelessly putting in their own time, their own energy, a lot of times on the side, and trying to get something out to the public because they're passionate about people. And so we want to promote people like you because we think that's a way better thing to support than all the other junk that we support. So anyway, brother, great to meet you. We hope you have a great rest of your night. Yes. And let's do this again soon. What do you say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we got to do a part 2.
Yes.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would love that. All right, you guys stay fringy out there. And Jon, we'll see you on the next one, buddy. This is That's So Fringy Podcast. We'll see you on the next. Bye.
Bye.